Have you ever wondered what obscure secrets did the old rural families keep behind locked doors? The case I will reveal today has remained hidden for almost a century in the forgotten valleys of Western Virginia. The story of Jedediah Blackwood is not just about an isolated family. It is about how geographical and social isolation allowed unthinkable practices to happen for generations. I discovered dusty judicial documents that no one examined in decades, reports of rural doctors who witnessed the devastating results of this distorted family lineage. What I found goes far beyond what we imagine possible in our own American history. I was truly shaken by what I discovered. These are family standards that have produced devastating genetic consequences that you need to know to understand the importance of studies on human heredity and genetics. If you value true stories, they would never appear in conventional history books. Subscribe now to accompany our series about the forgotten families of rural America. What I will reveal about the Blackwood will forever change their understanding of what happened in the isolated corners of the Appalachian Mountains in the 1920s. The blackened bones of the old Blackwood house still remain in the shaded valley of Pine Hollow, McDowell County, Western Virginia. The smell of ashes seems to impregnate the soil, even after 70 years of the fire that consumed the property. The trees grew highest around the ruins, as if nature itself tried to hide the secrets that occurred there between 1895 and 1932. Occasional visitors report an inexplicable sense of discomfort. Local residents avoid the place completely. The truth about this family reveals a fundamental failure in our understanding of human nature. When we isolate people for a long time, when we allow a man to establish complete rule over others without supervision or consequences, we create conditions for the unthinkable to flourish in the shadows. The Blackwood case is not just a history of consanguinity. It is a testimony about how institutional failures can allow predators to control entire generations. If you want to follow more cases like this, which move with all society and reveal hidden truths, subscribe to the channel so as not to lose any investigation. Pine Hollow existed in a world of its own, situated 27 kilometers from the nearest city. The 230-acre narrow valley was surrounded by 150 meters steep escarpment. The only access was a narrow trail that was impassable during the rigorous winter of the mountains. The Blackwood property contained the 6-room main wooden house, 3 smaller huts spread throughout the property, a mistreated barn, and cultivation fields that produced just enough for precarious survival. The hierarchy was clear and unchanging. Jedediah Blackwood, born in 1870, occupied a supreme position. His 2 older children, Ezekiel and Obadiah, performed their orders without question. Women and children worked from dawn at dusk in the fields, food preparation, maintaining deteriorated structures. Any disobedience resulted in confinement in the basement of the earth under the main house, where freezing temperatures in winter and rated infestation were only part of the torment. The constant sound of axes cutting wood mingled with the occasional screams that echoed through the valley. The smell of smoked meat and baked bread permeated the air, along with the persistent odor of rarely washed bodies. In the rare moments when visitors appeared, street vendors or census staff, the property fell in disturbing silence, with children and women disappearing in the rear structures. In 1895, when a thunderstorm dropped a tree over the main road that connected the county to the rest of the state, no one imagined that the resulting isolation would establish the conditions for the distorted dynasty that was about to begin. Jedediah stood out not only for her imposing stature of almost 2 meters, but for her exceptional ability with natural medicine. He knew properties of each plant in the surrounding forests, knew how to extract tinctures and prepare ointments that effectively treated from fevers to deep injuries. This knowledge made it a respected figure even beyond the isolation of Pine Hollow. When diphtheria's epidemic plagued the county in 1904, it was Jedediah who provided root and herbs that saved dozens of children. This reputation allowed him free movement between communities when others would be seen with distrust. He participated in religious meetings in the Welsh community, where his deep voice leading hymns impressed congregations. On the rare occasions when authorities visited the property, they found family apparently and self-sufficient. Jedediah showed impressive knowledge of biblical scriptures, citing complex memory passages, made a meticulous daily on climate, harvests and births, revealing orderly and methodological mind. This duality provided perfect protection, respected externally as healer and religious man, exercised absolute control internally without interference. No one questioned when new children appeared on the property, assumed as orphaned nephews or sons of distant cousins, that Jedediah generously welcomed. Leave in the comments, never give up the truth if you believe justice must reach all the oppressed. The first sign of the disturbing standard emerged in 1905, when Martha, Jedediah's wife, questioned her husband's frequent presence in her teenage daughter's room for nights. The next morning, Martha was found at the base of the cliff with a broken neck. Official report recorded an accident during medical herbs collection. In 1908, Sarah, the eldest daughter, gave birth to a child with cast fingers and severe breathing difficulty. Jedediah explained to the community that Sarah had married briefly with a traveling merchant who had died of pneumonia. The child passed away before completing 3 months. In 1912, Rebecca, second daughter, produced twins with distorted facial characteristics and inability to suck properly. Both died within weeks. This time, Jedediah kept birth completely hidden from the external community. In 1915, the third daughter, Ruth, gave birth to an exposed dorsal spine and died during delivery. Jedediah recorded death as puerperal fever in her personal diary. In 1918, Sarah's first granddaughter, then only 13, had pregnancy. A child was born with a disproportionate head and never developed speech capacity. He lived 6 years in a semi-catonic state before succumbing during a particularly severe winter. Between 1920 and 1927, records indicate at least 9 Blackwood property. 7 children had serious anomalies, from stunted members to congenital heart failures. Jedediah documented each case with clinical accuracy in a locked notebook found decades later, detailing expected progression of characteristics when lineage maintains purity. In 1929, Dr. William Harrison, an itinerant doctor, was called to the property to attend a serious case of pneumonia, which witnessed it, profoundly disturbed. More than 20 people inhabiting inappropriate space, multiple women in various stages of pregnancy, children with an obvious signs of severe genetic conditions. Jedediah's youngest daughter, Elizabeth, had lost husband during World War I. He returned to family property in 1917 with a 3-year-old daughter. In 1924, this granddaughter was pregnant. The child was born with severe intellectual disability and physical characteristics showing consanguinity. In 1927, definitive traumatic event occurred. Jedediah's great-year-old, then just 12, was found hidden in the barn, pregnant and terrified. He reported to the brothers that Grandpa had visited his room regularly since his 11th birthday. When rumors reached Elizabeth, she confronted her father. The next morning, Elizabeth was found hanged in the barn. Official report registered suicide, although defensive marks on the arms suggest differently. At the same time, a niece that Jedediah had brought to property after Spanish influenza epidemic was in labor at 14. A child was born with multiple anomalies and passed away hours later. Informal autopsy performed by Dr. Harrison documented extensive heart malformations and incomplete brain development. In June 1930, Eleanor, Jedediah's older granddaughter, publicly confronted his grandfather during a meeting at the Welsh Methodist Church. Loud enough for every congregation to hear, he accused him of crimes against nature and against God. Jedediah dragged her now by hair as she kept, shouting details that deeply disturbed those present. Pastor Willa Thompson tried to intervene, but Jedediah threatened to bring a plague over the whole city if someone interfered with family affairs. Knowing healer reputation and fearing that he could poison sources of water, communities did not act immediately. Eleanor never returned to church. Rumors suggested that he had been confined in the basement for months, fed only with water and bread. When he finally emerged, according to reports of a street vendor who visited property, it seemed ghost, empty eyes, and mechanical movement, as if soul had abandoned body. On the night of August 13, 1930, during Jedediah's birthday celebration, Eleanor served a gathered family meal. Main course contained roots of sakata and seeds of belladonna, poisons that Jedediah had taught herself to identify years before. 7 adult family members, including Jedediah, died before dawn. Eleanor brought together surviving children, 18 in total, many with obvious genetic problems. He led them to the city of Welch, an arduous walk of almost 30 kilometers. When they arrived, Eleanor handed over to the detailed daily sheriff, maintained by Jedediah, documenting precisely 3 decades of forced consanguinity and his results. Authorities found on the property evidence confirmed Eleanor's report, Jedediah meticulous records, including notes on family lineage purification experiment and clinical observations on progression of hereditary characteristics through controlled generations. Eleanor had carefully preserved these documents, keeping them hidden in a false bottom of chest. Detailed drawings showed distorted family tree, with same names repeatedly appearing in multiple positions. Dry umbilical cord samples were labeled and catalogued, along with hair strands of each child born on the property. Secret room discovered under the floor of the main house contained rudimentary medical equipment and more than 50 vials with preserved specimens, remains of evil fetuses, and organs with obvious anomalies. Jedediah had documented each specimen with clinical accuracy, noting exact kinship and predictable deviations based on genetic proximity. Authorities were so disturbed that sheriff ordered immediate burning of these evidence, a decision later criticized for preventing complete documentation of the case. County doctor, however, secretly photographed part of the material before destruction. These photographs were rediscovered in 1978 in a municipal archive and formed the basis for modern understanding of the case. In September 1930, Eleanor and surviving children were transferred to Western State Hospital. Medical reports documented devastating conditions, from severe intellectual disabilities to multiple physical malformations. 5 children died within the first month of hospitalization. Compromised immunological systems rapidly succumbing to hospital infections. Final ritual occurred in November 1932. Eleanor, having received permission to visit property under supervision, led solemn ceremony with surviving children. Each child deposited personal object in a central circle: cloth dowel, carved wood, hair ribbon. Eleanor recited names of all who had suffered on the property, including those who never received official names. He lit fire in the center of the circle and gradually expanded it until he swallowed the main structure. As flames consumed house that had witnessed so much horror, children formed line and walked toward the main road. Eleanor leading with younger child in his arms, 3-year-old girl with severe spinal curvature. She would never be able to walk independently. Iconic photography of this moment, captured by a reporter for the McDowell County Register who had followed a group, shows silhouettes clipped against intense flames. A poetic image of liberation that captured national imagination when history finally came to light in 1933. The impact of the Blackwood case reverberated far beyond McDowell County. In January 1933, Western Virginia Health Department issued emergency directive by ordering inspections in isolated communities. 7 other significant cases of consanguinity were discovered, although none with scale and systematization of the Blackwood. Correspondence between state authorities reveals increasing panic. Letter from the Public Health Commissioner to the governor mentioned disturbing possibilities of widespread phenomena in the mountainous regions, and recommended immediate intervention to prevent genetic degeneration of the rural population. Between 1933 and 1936, at least 12 fires on isolated properties were reported in southwest Virginia and eastern Kentucky. Subsequent investigations linked each case to families suspected of similar practices, suggesting clandestine movement inspired by Eleanor's action. The term Blackwood method first appeared in the 1934 police report, referring to the standard of poisoning with native plants, followed by purifying fire. Authorities related at least 5 cases in 3 different states to this specific standard. In rural communities, almost mythical figure of the Lady of the Ashes emerged, a mysterious woman who allegedly visited isolated areas, identified families with similar patterns to Blackwood, and left small packages containing poisonous plants and detailed instructions. No concrete evidence of this figure has never been found, but legend has persisted for decades. In 1935, a preliminary university study on genetic consequences of the case was suppressed after political pressure, aides fearing that complete details would stain reputation from the state and cause unnecessary panic. Documents were sealed by court order and remained inaccessible until 1978. The state response to the Blackwood case was quick and severe. In February 1933, 50 State Guard agents were highlighted to locate and investigate isolated communities in the Appalachian Mountains. Reports indicate significant resistance, whole families disappearing in the forest before the authorities' arrival. Entire communities keeping silence stubborn. Operation Sunrise, as designated, faced immense logistics challenges. Mountainous terrain made it difficult to access. Trails were often sabotaged with primitive traps. Local guides suddenly forgot paths to certain properties. In May 1933, a detachment led by Captain Morris located a similar complex to the Blackwood in Wyoming's neighboring county. As they approached, they were received with shots. Resulting shooting lasted hours, ending when occupants burned their own property and perished in the flames. Subsequent investigation found evidence of practices similar to those documented in the Blackwood case. As operation continued, disturbing pattern emerged. In at least 7 locations, authorities found only steaming ruins and abandoned properties, inhabitants having implemented Blackwood Protocol before they could be detained. Eleanor Blackwood became a polarizing figure. For authorities, it was criminal who had murdered 7 people, regardless of the circumstances. For oppressed communities, it represented justice when institutions failed. Hunting intensified when witness reported having seen her in Huntington in September 1933. A final confrontation occurred in an isolated cabin near the Kentucky border in December 1933. Surrounded by state agents, Eleanor allegedly emerged calmly from the structure, carrying original Jedediah diary. According to multiple reports, he deliberately walked towards officers, maintaining direct eye contact with the operation leader. His last words, recorded by 3 independent witnesses, remain recorded in regional cultural memory. Some ills are so deep that only fire can purify. Remembered children who could not speak for themselves. When agent tried to stop it, devastating explosion destroyed cabin and killed 4 officers. Subsequent investigation determined that Eleanor had soaked kerosene structure and spottedly positioned spola obtained from shotgun cartridges. Eleanor perished in the fire, a body identified only by family medallion found among charred remains. The legacy of the Blackwood case transcends its specific circumstances. In the rural communities of the Appalachians, peculiar tradition developed. As a child is born with obvious genetic problems, a small branch of cicuta plant used by Eleanor is placed anonymously at the family door, not as a threat, but as a silent recognition of community surveillance. Regional folklore collections document dozens of songs on Eleanor Dow Mountains or Lady of the Ashes. Variants exist from Georgia to Pennsylvania, all sharing common elements: a woman who releases children through purifying fire, who teaches plant secrets to girls so that they can protect themselves, which appears in dreams to alert blood that becomes very thick. In a community of Bickley's Mill, 30 kilometers from Pine Hollow, annual pilgrimages are reported to a small unmarked cemetery where some of the Blackwood children who have not survived are buried. Visitors leave small toys made by hand and specific wildflowers arrangements, the same as Eleanor documented in their diary as having medicinal properties. Academic debate continues to authenticity of certain documents attributed to Eleanor that periodically emerge in regional archives or private collections. The Herbarium of Eleanor, a detailed manual on native plant properties with an emphasis on its defensive uses, appeared simultaneously in 3 university libraries in 1975, without explanation of his origin. In a remarkable contrast, popular memory preserved a very different narrative. In the stories told in balconies during summer nights, Eleanor is portrayed as a fair avenger, protector of innocence when formal systems failed. These narratives often incorporate supernatural elements, ability to communicate with plants, gift of identifying predators by smell, appearances as a protective figure as children are in danger. Perhaps the most powerful symbol is a tradition that emerged among midwives in the region. When they watch family birth with questionable history, they leave discreetly small cloth doll fight, with protective herbs hidden near the crib, a silent memory that community is vigilant, that Blackwood standards will never be allowed again. If you watched so far, it is because you care about these stories that marked our country forever. Leave a comment saying, "I watched here," so that I can meet you and know who really cares about the search for historical truth. Like this video if the story of Eleanor Blackwood has touched your heart. Share so that Eleanor's memory will never be forgotten.